The council chamber was built to make humans feel small. Marcus Webb stood in the center of a room designed for giants. 20 feet above him, 12 alien species sat in their specialized seats, arranged in a perfect circle, like judges looking down at the accused. The Draconians needed chairs that could support their massive reptilian bulk. The Altarians required perches that accommodated their bird-like forearms. The Crystallines sat on platforms of pure light, their glass-like bodies refracting the chamber's blue glow into 1,000 dancing colors. The humans got a plain metal chair. Marcus didn't sit. He stood with his arms crossed, watching Prime Counselor Zathara's crystalline form shimmer as she prepared to call the vote. Her voice came through translation devices cold and precise, devoid of anything resembling empathy. The matter before us concerns mining rights in the Kepler system. The Vroni Collective has submitted a formal request to assume control of all human operations in that sector. I call for a vote. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. 30 years, 87,000 workers, $4.2 trillion invested, gone in a single vote. The Draconian Empire votes yes. General Kratos didn't even look at Marcus when he spoke. His scales rippled with something that might have been satisfaction. The Altarian Trade Federation votes yes. Of course they did. The Altarians had been promised a cut of the profits. The Crystalline Sovereignty votes yes. One by one they voted. 12 species, 12 voices. Not a single one spoke for Earth. The human delegation may now cast their vote, Zathara said. There was something in her translated voice that sounded almost amused. Though as a procedural formality, I should note that a single negative vote cannot override unanimous consensus from all other member species. Marcus stepped forward. The sound of his shoes on the crystal floor echoed in the massive chamber. Earth votes no. We reject this decision completely. Silence. Then General Kratos made a sound like rocks grinding together. The draconian way of laughing. Your objection is noted, Ambassador Webb. Zathara's body flickered and ignored. The motion passes. The Vroni Collective will assume control of all human operations in the Kepler system within 30 standard days. Compensation will be provided at fair market value. Fair market value. Marcus knew what that meant. $340 billion for facilities worth $4.2 trillion. 8 cents on the dollar. And the humans would have to accept it because the Galactic Council had decided. The other ambassadors were already standing filing out of the chamber. None of them looked at Marcus. None of them cared that they had just stolen 3 decades of human work. Marcus waited until the room was nearly empty. Then he reached into his jacket and pressed a small device hidden in the inner pocket. It looked like a pen. It was actually a quantum encrypted communicator that couldn't be detected by any technology the council possessed. He pressed it once, twice, 3 times in a specific pattern. Somewhere on Earth, in a secure facility beneath the Pentagon, a message was being received. 2 words that would change everything. Protocol 7. Marcus took one last look at the empty council chamber, at the seats built for beings who thought humanity was beneath them, at the crystal walls that were supposed to impress him with their beauty. He smiled. For the record, he said quietly, knowing no one was listening, you're going to regret this. The council chamber faded from Marcus's mind as he walked through the corridors of the council headquarters. His footsteps echoed on floors made from materials mined on worlds humanity would never be allowed to touch. The walls displayed scrolling text in 17 different languages, updates from across the galaxy, trade agreements and treaties, and announcements that pretended all species were equal. It was all a lie. Marcus had known it for years. But it took today's vote to make him finally accept the truth. 30 years ago, when humanity first discovered the Kepler system, it had seemed like a miracle. 7 moons orbiting a gas giant, each one rich in rare minerals that Earth desperately needed. The Galactic Council had congratulated humanity on the find. They'd offered to sell humans the technology needed to mine those moons. FTL drives, defensive shields, medical equipment that could keep workers alive in hostile environments. The prices were astronomical. But Earth had paid them. What choice did they have? Marcus remembered those early days. He'd been a newly qualified astronaut, then fresh out of training, one of the first humans to pilot an alien-designed ship. The controls had been awkward designed for beings with different physiology. The engines were inefficient, burning through fuel at rates that made long-distance travel barely economical. The shields flickered and failed at random intervals. Human engineers had complained. The aliens had shrugged. You'll learn, they'd said. Give it time. So humanity learned. They modified the FTL drives, improving fuel efficiency by 34%. They rewrote the shield harmonics, making them more stable. They redesigned the life support systems to actually keep people comfortable instead of just barely alive. The aliens had noticed, of course, but they dismissed it as minor improvements and expected optimization. They still charged the same exorbitant prices for their technology. They still treated humans like children playing with tools they barely understood. And humanity kept improving things, kept making alien technology actually work the way it was supposed to. 10 years into the Kepler operation, Marcus had been promoted to Earth's representative on the Council. It was supposed to be an honor, a sign that humanity was being accepted as an equal partner in galactic civilization. Instead, it had been 20 years of watching aliens treat Earth like a convenient source of cheap labor and innovative problem-solving, while offering nothing but condescension in return. The vote today was just the final insult. Marcus reached his office. It was in the basement level of the council building, a small room with a single window that looked out at a maintenance shaft. Even the janitors had better accommodations than Earth's ambassador. He sat down at his desk and opened the secure quantum communicator. Not the hidden one in his jacket, the official one that Earth's government had given him when he'd accepted this position. A message was waiting. It had been sent 4 minutes ago, encrypted with codes that only 5 people in the entire human species knew how to decrypt. Marcus entered the sequence and watched the message appear. Protocol 7 confirmed. Phase 1 initiated. Maintain cover position. He closed the communicator and leaned back in his chair. 30 years. That's how long humanity had been planning for this moment. 30 years of being told they were inferior, primitive, not quite ready for full participation in galactic society. 30 years of watching the Council make decisions that hurt Earth and helped everyone else. But also 30 years of preparation. 15 years ago, Sarah Blackwood had been an Undersecretary of Defense when the Crystalline Empire had decided they needed Europa's ice for some industrial project. 3,000 human colonists had been given 1 week to pack up and leave. 1 week to abandon homes they'd built over decades. Sarah had watched it happen, watched humans beg for more time for compensation for basic respect, and watched the Council ignore every request. That was the day Sarah had started working on Protocol 7. A contingency plan, a worst-case scenario, something to implement if humanity ever decided that being part of the Galactic Council was worse than being independent. Marcus had joined the planning committee 3 years later, right after he'd been appointed as Earth's ambassador. He thought maybe he could change things from the inside. Maybe he could make the aliens understand that humans deserve better treatment. 20 years on the council had cured him of that delusion. The other members of the planning committee were scattered across human space. Admiral Kate Reeves commanded the shipyards orbiting Jupiter. Dr. Elena Volkov ran what the aliens thought was a small research station on Titan. Commander James Corrin led a squadron of escort ships that protected human cargo vessels. Victoria Carver, who preferred to be called Vex, ran an intelligence operation from a hidden base in the Oort cloud that the aliens didn't even know existed. 5 people who knew the full extent of Protocol 7. 5 people who had spent 15 years preparing for the day when Earth would need to walk away from galactic civilization. And thousands more who knew parts of the plan. Officers who had trained for evacuation scenarios. Engineers who had been told to design ships with hidden capabilities. Scientists who had been working on classified projects they thought were just theoretical research. All of it coming together now. Marcus pulled up the timeline on his personal tablet. 72 hours. That's how long they had to execute the most complex operation in human history. 72 hours to evacuate 4.2 million people from 47 different worlds. 72 hours to pack up every piece of technology, every research project, every prototype that humanity had developed. 72 hours to erase all evidence of what humanity had really been doing for the past 3 decades. Dr. Silas Crane would coordinate the demolition operations across the Kepler complex. Captain Dante Cross would oversee the civilian evacuation fleets, and thousands of others, each with their specific role in the most ambitious operation humanity had ever attempted. And the aliens had no idea it was happening. 2,000 light-years away in a bunker 300 feet beneath the Pentagon, Sarah Blackwood stared at the message that had just arrived. Protocol 7. 2 words. A lifetime of preparation. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her desk to make them stop. 15 years. She'd been working on this plan for 15 years. Running scenarios, training personnel, building ships and facilities, and evacuation routes that the Galactic Council didn't know existed. And now it was real. Sarah stood up and walked to the wall safe. Her hands were steady now. She'd stopped shaking the moment she decided to move. The safe required three different authentication methods: fingerprint, retinal scan, a 64-character password that she'd memorized the day she'd been briefed on Protocol 7's existence. The door clicked open. Inside was a single red folder. Sarah pulled it out and opened it. Inside were orders that would go to every human military installation, every colony, every research station, every ship in space. Orders that would begin the largest coordinated movement of people in human history. She picked up the secure phone on her desk, the quantum encrypted line that connected directly to Admiral Kate Reeves's flagship. Kate answered on the first ring. "This is Reeves." "Kate, it's Sarah. Protocol 7 is active. Begin Phase 1 immediately." There was a pause. Sarah could hear Kate's breath catch. Then when she spoke again, her voice was absolutely calm. "Understood. How long do we have?" 72 hours for full withdrawal. After that, we go dark." "Copy that. We've trained for this. We won't let you down." Sarah hung up and stared at the red folder. Europa. 3,000 colonists given 1 week to evacuate. She'd watched it happen from her office in the Pentagon. Watched humans lose their homes because the crystalline empire wanted ice, and the Galactic Council didn't care about human property rights. She'd promised herself that day that it would never happen again. Now she was about to make good on that promise. Sarah opened her computer and began sending the coded messages. Each one looked like routine government business. Budget reports, personnel transfers, equipment requisitions. But hidden inside each message, encrypted in ways the aliens couldn't detect, were the real orders. Execute Protocol 7. Evacuate all personnel. Secure all assets. Leave nothing behind. Admiral Kate Reeves stood on the observation deck of the UNSS Valiant and watched the shipyards of Jupiter spread out before her. 512 ships. That's how many vessels were currently docked at the facility. Cargo haulers, mining ships, research vessels, and tucked away in the secure sections that visiting aliens never got to see, the newest generation of human warships. Ships that the Galactic Council didn't know existed. Kate pulled up the evacuation plan on her tablet. She'd reviewed it hundreds of times, run through the sequences in simulation so often she could execute them in her sleep. But this wasn't a simulation. "Attention all personnel," she said into the ship-wide comm. "This is Admiral Reeves. Protocol 7 is now active. I repeat, Protocol 7 is active. All department heads to their stations. Execute evacuation sequence Alpha." Around her, the bridge came alive with controlled urgency. Officers moved to their positions. Screens lit up with ship positions and evacuation timelines. Communications started flowing between the Valiant and every other vessel in the fleet. Kate's executive officer, a sharp woman named Commander Lisa Park, appeared at her side. "Admiral, all ships confirm receipt of orders. Evacuation sequence is initiating across all sectors." "Good. What's our timeline?" "First wave can be ready to depart in 18 hours. Full evacuation completed in 68 hours with current projections." 4 hours ahead of schedule. Kate allowed herself a small smile. "Make it happen, Commander." She turned back to the viewport and watched as the massive shipyard began to come alive. Ships that had been dormant were powering up. Docking clamps were releasing. Personnel were moving through the corridors in choreographed patterns that looked random but were actually precisely timed. The Galactic Council thought humans were disorganized, inefficient, too emotional to execute complex operations. They were about to learn how wrong they were. On Titan, Dr. Elena Volkov stood in the center of her laboratory and felt a surge of vindication so powerful it almost made her dizzy. The message had just come through. Encrypted, unmistakable. Protocol 7 active. Secure all assets. Elena looked around her laboratory. The aliens thought this was a small research station. Population 300 scientists. Purpose studying atmospheric phenomena and conducting basic materials research. It was a lie. Elena pulled up the facility map on her workstation. The laboratory they knew about occupied roughly 3% of the actual complex. The other 97% was buried beneath Titan's surface, hidden behind shielding that made it invisible to alien sensors. 47 interconnected facilities. 2,000 researchers. Projects that made the aliens' best technology look like children's toys. She pressed the intercom. "Attention all personnel. Initiate lockdown sequence Omega. Begin asset evacuation protocol. We have 72 hours. Around her, the laboratory transformed. Walls slid open to reveal equipment that wasn't supposed to exist. Floors retracted to show elevators leading down to the hidden levels. Personnel emerged from sections that the facility blueprints didn't include. Elena walked to the nearest elevator and descended 300 feet. The doors opened onto a hangar filled with prototypes. The quantum fold drive occupied the entire north section, a propulsion system that could move ships 3.2 times faster than the best FTL technology the aliens possessed, and it used half the energy. The adaptive shield generators lined the east wall, defensive systems that were 5 times more powerful than draconian military-grade shields. They could analyze incoming fire and restructure themselves at the molecular level to resist it. The neural targeting systems filled the west section. Weapons so precise that they could disable specific systems on enemy ships without destroying the vessel. The kind of surgical warfare the aliens had never imagined possible. And in the center of it all, the autonomous construction swarms. Millions of nanoscale robots that could build space stations in days instead of months. 15 years of work. 15 years of telling the aliens they were conducting basic research while actually revolutionizing every aspect of space technology. Elena pulled out her tablet and began entering commands. Every piece of equipment would be cataloged, packed, loaded onto ships. Nothing would be left behind. The aliens had called humanity primitive. They were about to discover what primitive really meant. Captain Dante Cross sat in the command chair of the cargo hauler Liberty's Promise and read the message that had just come through. Protocol 7 active. Operation Exodus begins now. He'd been waiting for this message for 3 years, training for it, preparing his crew, making sure his ship was ready. The Liberty's Promise looked like a standard cargo vessel from the outside, the kind of ship that moved goods between human colonies and trading stations. Slow, unarmed, unremarkable. It was anything but. Dante stood up and activated the ship-wide comm. All hands, this is the captain. What we've trained for is happening. Protocol 7 is active. We are now on evacuation duty. I need all department heads in the briefing room in 5 minutes. He walked to the window and looked out at the fleet around him. 212 ships, all of them disguised cargo haulers just like his. But every single one had been secretly modified. Hulls reinforced, engines upgraded. Cargo holds converted to accommodate passengers. Together, they could transport 50,000 people in a single run. And there were 21 identical fleets scattered across human space. The briefing room filled quickly. His department heads filed in their faces, showing controlled excitement mixed with determination. Ladies and gentlemen, Dante said, this is Operation Exodus. We have 72 hours to execute the largest evacuation in human history. Our assigned pickup point is the Kepler mining complex. 87,000 workers need transport. We're going to bring every single one of them home. He pulled up the timeline on the main display. First wave departs in 24 hours. We'll run 3 rotations. Load times are 30 minutes per vessel. Transit time to rally point is 8 hours. The math is tight, but we can do it. His executive officer, a woman named Sarah Kim, spoke up. Captain, what if the aliens try to interfere? Dante smiled. They won't. By the time they realize what's happening, we'll be gone. Marcus Webb sat in his basement office at the council headquarters and watched the status updates flow across his secure tablet. Admiral Reeves' evacuation sequence initiated. Timeline 68 hours. Dr. Volkov asset securing in progress. 47 facilities active. Captain Cross fleet departing for Kepler complex in 24 hours. All across human space, the machine was coming to life. Thousands of people executing a plan they'd practiced, but never thought they'd actually use. And the aliens suspected nothing. Marcus pulled up the surveillance feed from the council chambers. The Draconian delegation was celebrating their victory. The Vroni were already making plans for taking over the Kepler facilities. The Crystallins were discussing how to spend humanity's compensation money. None of them had any idea what was about to happen. Protocol 7 wasn't a military response. It wasn't an act of war. It was something the Galactic Council couldn't comprehend because they'd never imagined humans would have the capability to execute it. Complete withdrawal. Total evacuation. 4.2 million people vanishing from galactic civilization in 72 hours. Taking with them every piece of technology they'd developed. Every improvement they'd made to alien designs. Every innovation that had quietly been keeping the galactic economy functioning for 3 decades. Marcus thought about Sarah Blackwood's promise. The one she'd made 15 years ago after watching humans lose their homes on Europa. Never again. He closed the tablet and looked out his small window at the alien city beyond. They'd called humanity primitive, inexperienced, not ready for full participation in galactic society. In 72 hours, they were going to learn what humanity was really capable of. And by the time they understood, it would be too late. 24 hours after Protocol 7 activation, Captain Dante Cross stood on the bridge of the Liberty's Promise and watched the most perfectly choreographed operation in human history unfold across his displays. 47 worlds, 4,247 ships, 4.2 million people, and everything was running like clockwork. Captain, we're receiving confirmation from Transport Group 7. His executive officer, Sarah Kim, reported. New Detroit evacuation is at 82%. They're ahead of schedule. Dante pulled up the global tactical display. It showed the entire human presence in galactic space rendered in 3 dimensions, with real-time updates flowing in from every colony, every station, every ship. The display was slowly going dark, green markers turning to amber as facilities evacuated, amber shifting to red as locations were abandoned entirely. It looked like humanity was bleeding out across the galaxy. But it wasn't death. It was birth. Status on Kepler Complex, Dante asked. First wave completed 6 hours ago. 87,000 miners successfully transferred to Rally Point Alpha. Second wave is loading now. Dr. Crane's demolition team reports they're on schedule for the cleanup phase. Dante nodded. The Kepler complex had been his primary concern. 87,000 people working across 7 moons, all of it infrastructure built over 3 decades. Getting everyone out while making sure the aliens found nothing useful when they took over. Bring up the detailed view of New Detroit. The display shifted to show a single world. Industrial colony, population 15,000, 200 manufacturing facilities producing everything from medical equipment to Starship components. 60 hours ago, those factories had been running at full capacity. Now they were empty shells. Dante watched the data stream. The last transport ships were lifting off. In the facilities below, thermite charges were being armed. In 4 hours, those charges would detonate simultaneously. The factories would remain standing, but every critical system would be destroyed. Power cores melted. Computer systems reduced to slag. Manufacturing equipment rendered into expensive paperweights. Sir, message from the surface. Factory Administrator Carl Rodriguez reports final personnel clear. All assets secured. Demolition sequence is armed. Acknowledged. Tell Carl to get his team on the last transport and get out of there. Dante pulled up the next location, Europa Research Station. 3,000 scientists, specialized equipment that couldn't be rushed. The evacuation there had taken longer, but the timeline showed they were still within parameters. 94% complete, 6 hours ahead of the worst-case scenario. Mars colony, 45,000 residents. The largest civilian population in human space outside of Earth itself. The city would remain standing. The power would still work. The water would still flow. But every human being would be gone. Houses intact but empty, streets silent. An entire civilization present in everything except the people who had built it. The aliens would find a ghost town. Captain, we're getting reports from all sectors, Sarah said. Synchronization is holding at 3.7 seconds variance across the entire operation. 3.7 seconds. 4,000 ships spread across hundreds of light years, all moving in coordinated patterns, and the timing variance was less than 4 seconds. The Galactic Council thought humans were disorganized, emotional, incapable of executing complex operations without alien supervision. They were about to learn how catastrophically wrong they were. On the planet New Detroit, Carl Rodriguez walked through the empty factory floor and felt a strange mixture of sadness and satisfaction. His father had helped build this place 30 years ago, designed the production lines, installed the equipment, trained the first generation of workers. Carl had grown up here, learned to operate a plasma cutter before he learned to drive, spent his entire adult life making this factory one of the most productive in human space. Now he was about to destroy it. Not all of it. The building would remain. The structure was sound. But every piece of equipment that made the factory functional would be reduced to worthless scrap. Boss, that's the last of the manufacturing equipment, his assistant, Tony Martinez, said. Demolition team reports ready on all systems. Carl looked at the thermite charges placed at strategic points throughout the facility. Small devices, precise. They wouldn't cause explosions. Just incredibly focused heat that would melt through critical components in seconds. Power cores, computer control systems, precision calibration equipment, molecular fabrication arrays. All the technology that humans had developed to make manufacturing actually efficient. All the improvements that had taken alien designs and made them work 3 times better. Gone. What about the other facilities? Carl asked. All 200 factories report armed and ready. Synchronized detonation in 4 hours. Carl nodded. He pulled out his communicator and entered the final authorization code. The code that would lock in the demolition sequence and make it irreversible. His hand hesitated over the confirm button. 30 years of work, his father's legacy, the place where he'd planned to spend the rest of his life. Then he thought about the council vote, about aliens taking everything humans had built and calling it fair compensation. About 3 decades of being treated like cheap labor that should be grateful for the opportunity to exist in galactic civilization. He pressed confirm. All personnel to final transport. We leave in 30 minutes. Carl took one last look at the factory floor, at the equipment his father had installed, at the production lines where he'd spent half his life. They wanted our work, he said quietly. Now they can have the empty shell. 1,200 light-years away in the Titan Research Complex, Dr. Elena Volkov supervised the most important packing operation in scientific history. 47 facilities, 2,000 researchers, 15 years of classified work. Everything was being cataloged, packed, loaded onto ships that would take it to a destination the aliens would never find. Elena walked through Lab 7 and watched her team work with practiced efficiency. Each piece of equipment was being secured in specialized containers. Each data core was being encrypted and backed up in triplicate. Each prototype was being cataloged and assigned a tracking number. The quantum fold drive components alone filled 3 entire cargo ships. The technology that could move vessels at speeds 3.2 times faster than anything the aliens possessed. And it used half the energy. The aliens thought human FTL technology was just slightly modified versions of their designs. They had no idea that human engineers had completely rebuilt the underlying physics. Dr. Volkov, the prototype reactors are secured. One of her team leads reported, all 12 units are loaded and ready for transport. 12 reactors, each one capable of producing energy output 100 times more efficient than alien fusion cores. Power generation that made human ships capable of running defensive systems and weapons simultaneously while alien vessels had to choose between the two. What about the genetic research data? 15 petabytes fully encrypted and backed up. Quantum storage cores are in transit. Elena pulled up her master inventory. 47 facilities worth of equipment and research. It should have taken months to pack. Her team was doing it in 60 hours. Dr. Volkov, a young researcher named Kevin Walsh, approached. We finished securing the neural targeting systems. All prototypes are accounted for. The targeting systems. Weapons so precise they could disable specific components on enemy ships without destroying the vessel. Fire control that could target the bridge while leaving life support intact. The kind of surgical warfare that the Galactic Council had never imagined possible. Elena thought about all the times the Council had dismissed human research as derivative, called it minor improvements on alien designs, treated human scientists like students copying homework from smarter classmates. In 72 hours, when the aliens came to investigate the abandoned facilities, they would find empty rooms, clean floors, functioning power and life support. But every computer would be wiped. Every research file would be gone. Every prototype would have vanished. And the aliens would finally understand that for 15 years, humanity had been conducting research that made their best work look primitive. Excellent work, everyone, Elena said. We're 36 hours into the operation. 36 hours to go. Let's make sure we don't leave them a single bite. Commander James Corrin sat in the captain's chair of the UNSS Sentinel and watched 3 Draconian cruisers approach on his tactical display. This was the moment he'd been training for, the scenario they'd run through hundreds of times in simulation. Alien military forces attempting to interfere with the evacuation. Status on Transport Group 7, he asked his tactical officer. 15 civilian vessels, 8,000 civilians on board. They're on course for Rally Point Alpha, ETA 4 hours. Distance to Draconian cruisers. Closing fast, they'll be in intercept range in 7 minutes. Corrin pulled up the comm channel to his squadron. 20 ships, not cargo haulers like the transports they were protecting. These were warships, the newest generation that humanity had built in secret. From the outside, they looked like standard escort vessels, lightly armed, defensive systems only, the kind of ships that protected cargo convoys from pirates. From the inside, they were something the Galactic Council had never seen before. All ships, this is Sentinel Actual. Move to intercept formation. Place yourselves between the Draconian cruisers and our transports. Defensive posture only. Do not power weapons unless I give the explicit order. 20 acknowledgements came back instantly. Corrin watched his ships move into position. Precise, coordinated, moving at speeds that would surprise anyone who thought they were looking at standard human vessels. The Draconian cruisers were massive. Each one was 3 times the size of Corrin's flagship. Heavy armor, military-grade weapons, shields designed to withstand sustained bombardment. The Draconians had the best military technology in the Galactic Council. They'd been fighting wars for 10,000 years. They had no idea what they were about to encounter. "Sir, we're being hailed," his communications officer reported. "Put them through." The view screen lit up with the image of a Draconian commander. His scales were dark green, marked with the scars of numerous battles. His eyes held the kind of arrogance that came from never losing a fight. "Human vessels, this is Commander Vecthar of the Draconian Third Fleet. You are operating in restricted space. Power down your engines and prepare for inspection." The space wasn't restricted. This was harassment. The Draconians testing to see if humans would submit to random searches just because an alien ship demanded it. Corrin kept his voice calm, professional. "Commander Vecthar, these are civilian transports on legitimate routes. We're exercising our right to free passage under Galactic Council regulations. Council regulations allow for inspection of vessels when military forces deem it necessary. Power down now." Corrin glanced at his tactical officer. The Draconian cruisers were trying to scan his ships. Powerful sensor beams probing the human vessels, attempting to penetrate their hulls and analyze their capabilities. The beams hit the new adaptive shields and simply stopped. No penetration, no data. "Sir, Draconian scans are failing," the tactical officer reported quietly. "They're reading zero information from our shields." On the view screen, Commander Vecthar's expression changed. Confusion replaced arrogance. "What kind of shielding is that?" he muttered, not realizing his comm was still open. Then one of Vecthar's officers said something in the Draconian language, loud enough for the translator to pick up. "Sir, power readings are off the scale. Each human ship is showing output equivalent to 3 of our flagships." Vecthar's eyes widened. He looked at Corrin with new calculation in his gaze. "Commander, I'm going to ask you once more to withdraw," Corrin said. His voice was still calm, still professional. "These are civilian transports. They are not your concern. You're hiding something. Those power readings." Corrin made a decision. He nodded to his tactical officer. "Weapons to standby power. Don't activate targeting. Just let them see the energy buildup." The tactical officer entered the commands. On the Draconian cruisers, every sensor would suddenly be screaming warnings. Energy signatures so massive they would overload standard detection systems. Power levels that shouldn't be possible on ships that small. Commander Vecthar's face went rigid. "Commander," Corrin said quietly, "you have 30 seconds to withdraw. Choose carefully." The silence stretched. Corrin could see Vecthar doing the math. 3 Draconian cruisers, 20 human escorts, ships that were somehow showing power output 3 times higher than they should, shields that couldn't be scanned, weapons that were building enough energy to make Draconian sensors overload. 15 seconds passed. 20, 25. "Draconian Third Fleet withdraw to safe distance," Vecthar said finally. His voice was tight. "But this will be reported to the Council." "Report whatever you want," Corrin replied. "We're just going home." The Draconian cruisers turned and accelerated away. Corrin watched them go. He knew what would happen next. Vecthar would file a report. The Council would read it. They'd see warnings about human military capability being vastly underestimated. And by the time they decided to investigate, humanity would be gone. "Stand down from alert status," Corrin ordered. "Resume escort duties, and someone get a message to Admiral Reeves. Tell her the Draconians are starting to notice. Recommend we accelerate the timeline where possible." 60 hours into Protocol 7, Marcus Webb sat in his basement office at the Council headquarters and watched status updates flow across his encrypted tablet. The evacuation was 94% complete. Across 47 worlds, humans were boarding the last transports. Facilities were being sealed. Demolition charges were being armed. And the Galactic Council was finally starting to realize something was wrong. Marcus pulled up the intercepted communications that Vex Carver's intelligence team had been monitoring. The Council's internal channels were lighting up with confused reports. Draconian military intelligence noting unusual human ship movements. Altarian trade monitors flagging massive increases in cargo traffic. Century Republic border stations reporting human vessels passing through in unprecedented numbers. But none of them had put the pieces together yet. They saw individual anomalies. They didn't see the coordinated operation. Marcus's door chimed. He closed the tablet and looked up to see a young Altarian functionary standing in the doorway. Ambassador Webb Prime Counselor Zathara requests your presence in the council chambers. For what purpose? The council has questions about recent human activities. Marcus stood slowly. This was expected. Inevitable. They'd always known the aliens would notice eventually. The only question was whether they'd understand in time to interfere. The council chamber was more crowded than Marcus had seen it in months. Not just the 12 permanent members. Every major species had sent representatives. The room buzzed with conversation in a dozen different languages. Prime Counselor Zathara's crystalline form flickered as she called the session to order. Ambassador Webb, thank you for joining us on such short notice. Marcus walked to the center of the chamber, stood in the same spot where he'd voted no on the Kepler decision 60 hours ago. The council has received troubling reports, Zathara continued. Human shipping traffic has increased by 487% in the past 3 days. Multiple colonies are reporting mass departures. Mining stations are going dark. Research facilities are being abandoned. We require an explanation. Marcus looked around the chamber, at the Draconians who had laughed when he'd voted no, at the Altarians who had voted to steal Kepler, at the Crystallines who had dismissed every human complaint for 5 years. Earth is relocating some personnel, he said simply. Some personnel, General Crothis' voice was sharp. We've detected thousands of ships moving simultaneously. This is coordinated evacuation. Earth's internal operations are not subject to council oversight. They are when they disrupt galactic commerce and trigger military alerts, Trade Minister Velcor said. We demand full disclosure of your government's intentions. Marcus pulled out his communicator, the official one. He keyed in a command and spoke carefully. I'm afraid I'm not authorized to provide that information. You'll need to contact Earth's government directly for details. He knew what would happen next. The council would try to contact Earth. They'd use official diplomatic channels, emergency frequencies, every communication method they had, and they would get nothing but silence. Because for the past 12 hours, Earth had stopped answering alien calls. Zathara's form pulsed with agitation. Ambassador Webb, this is highly irregular. The council has a right to understand what is happening in human territories. With respect, Prime Counselor Earth has a right to manage its own affairs without explaining every decision to this body. Not when those decisions affect galactic stability. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. 60 hours ago, this council voted to confiscate 30 years of human work. You called it legal. You called it justified. You called it fair compensation. That matter was decided through proper procedures. You taught us that might makes right in this chamber. That 12 votes matter more than one. That human interests are negotiable and alien interests are absolute. Marcus turned to look at each council member in turn. We learned the lesson. Thank you for teaching it so well. He walked out of the chamber. Behind him, the council erupted into shouted demands and angry questions. But Marcus didn't look back. He had 12 hours left at council headquarters. 12 hours until the last human ship would jump and vanish from galactic space. 12 hours until the council learned what expendable really meant. Dr. Silas Crane stood in the central control room of Kepler Mining Complex 7 and prepared to destroy 30 years of work. The facility was empty now. 87,000 miners evacuated. Equipment packed and shipped to rally points. Data cores wiped clean. All that remained was the infrastructure itself. The power cores, the life support systems, the mining equipment built into the moon's surface. The aliens would take control in 30 days. They'd find functional facilities, working power, operating life support, but they wouldn't find a single piece of human innovation. Dr. Crane, all personnel are clear, his team lead reported. Demolition charges are armed on all 7 moons. Synchronized detonation in 10 minutes. Silas pulled up the master control display. 7 moons, 2,400 facilities, 50 simultaneous explosions per moon. The charges were small, precise. They wouldn't damage the facilities themselves. Just melt the critical components that made them functional. Power cores that human engineers had modified to run at 67% higher efficiency than the alien designs. Gone. Computer control systems running human-written software that made mining operations 3 times more productive. Gone. Life support equipment that humans had rebuilt from scratch because the alien versions kept failing. Gone. All teams report ready for final departure, the team lead said. Silas entered the final authorization code, the one that made the demolition sequence irreversible. Execute, he said quietly. The countdown began. 10 minutes. Silas and his team walked to the last transport ship, boarded, sealed the hatches. The ship lifted off just as the countdown reached 0. From orbit, they watched the detonations, 50 blooms of heat on each moon. Simultaneous, precise, beautiful in their destruction. The Kepler mining complex still stood. The buildings were intact. The power still worked, but every improvement humans had made over 30 years was reduced to molten slag. "Sir," the pilot said quietly, "we're receiving similar reports from all sectors. Europa cleanup complete, new Detroit factories demolished, Titan facilities stripped, Mars colony evacuated." Silas nodded. Across 47 worlds, the same scene was playing out. Humans leaving behind empty shells, taking the soul of their civilization with them. "Set course for Rally Point Alpha," he ordered. "Time to go home." But home wasn't Earth anymore. Home was somewhere the aliens would never find. 72 hours after Protocol 7 activation, Admiral Kate Reeves stood on the bridge of the UNSS Valiant and watched the final pieces fall into place. "Admiral, final headcount is complete," Commander Lisa Park reported. 4.2 million humans accounted for. 0 casualties, 0 individuals left behind. Kate felt something release in her chest. Tension she'd been carrying for 3 days. Everyone was out, every single person. "All ships report ready for final jump," Park continued. "Quantum fold drives charged and synchronized, awaiting your order." Kate pulled up the tactical display. 4,247 ships, spread across 50 rally points, all of them ready to jump simultaneously. Not to destinations the aliens knew about, not to systems listed in any database the Council could access, to coordinates that humanity had discovered years ago and kept secret, to a region of space no alien species had ever explored, to a place where humans could build their own civilization without interference. "All ships, this is Admiral Reeves. Execute Protocol 7 phase final. Jump on my mark." She looked at the display one last time, at the galaxy that humans had tried so hard to be part of, at the civilization that had treated them like children for 3 decades. Mark. 4,247 ships vanished simultaneously. Not with the familiar distortion of standard FTL drives, with the clean disappearance of quantum fold technology that left no trace, no signature, no trail to follow. One moment they were there, the next they were gone, and scattered across the galaxy at 47 different worlds and 2,400 facilities. The lights stayed on in empty buildings where 4.2 million humans had simply ceased to exist. Marcus Webb stood on the roof of the Council headquarters and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, the last human ships were jumping. 4.2 million people vanishing from galactic civilization in perfect synchronization. The greatest coordinated operation in human history. And Marcus was the last one, the final human in Council space. His communicator chimed, a message from Sarah Blackwood. "Final transport departing Earth orbit in 30 minutes. You're on it." Marcus looked down at the alien city below, at the civilization that had never valued what humanity offered, at the species who thought they could take whatever they wanted and call it legal. He pulled out a handwritten note, walked back inside, made his way to Prime Counselor Zathara's office. The door was unlocked. The office was empty. Marcus placed the note on her desk. "We came in peace. We stayed in hope. We leave in dignity. Thank you for the lesson." He walked out, took the elevator to the roof, boarded the shuttle that was waiting. As the shuttle lifted into space, Marcus looked back one last time, at the Council headquarters where he'd spent 5 years trying to make aliens understand that humans deserve respect, at the civilization that had taught humanity the most valuable lesson of all, that sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing the game. The shuttle accelerated, jumped, and Marcus Webb, the last human in Galactic Council space, vanished into the dark. Behind him in the Council chambers, alarms began to scream. Every screen showed the same message. Human signature none detected. 4.2 million people. Gone. The reckoning. 1 week after humanity vanished, Prime Counselor Zathara stood in the Council chambers and felt something she had never experienced in her 200-year existence. Fear. The emergency assembly had been called 72 hours ago. Every major species had sent their highest-ranking officials. The chamber that usually echoed with arrogant pronouncements and casual dismissals now buzzed with barely controlled panic, because in 7 days galactic civilization had begun to collapse. "Report from the Beacon Maintenance Authority," an Altarian bureaucrat said, his voice shaking. 312 hyperspace navigation beacons are now offline. Ships are getting lost in deep space. We've received distress calls from 547 vessels in the past week alone. Zathara's crystalline body flickered. 312 beacons. The network that allowed safe FTL travel across the galaxy. Humans had been maintaining them. She hadn't known that. None of them had known. Economic report, Trade Minister Velcor said. His four hands were trembling as he pulled up data displays. 40% of all galactic trade routes have collapsed. The logistics software managing shipping schedules was human-designed. Without it, cargo vessels are arriving at wrong destinations, missing connections, creating bottlenecks at every major port. The numbers scrolled across the display. Billions of credits in losses. Supply chains breaking down. Food shipments delayed. Medicine not reaching colonies that needed it. All because humans had quietly written the software that made interstellar commerce actually function. Manufacturing sector, an industrial representative reported. 60% of our production facilities are experiencing critical failures. Power output is down 43% across all major industrial worlds. Systems that were running efficiently last week are now barely operational. Zathara pulled up the technical analysis. Every facility showing problems had one thing in common. Human engineers had modified the equipment, improved the efficiency, made alien technology actually work the way it was supposed to. And when the humans left, they'd taken those improvements with them. General Krathus stood his massive draconian frame radiating fury and something that looked uncomfortably like fear. The military situation is worse, he growled. Our newest battleships are breaking down, engines overheating, weapons systems experiencing cascading failures, life support malfunctioning on half our fleet. He pulled up technical schematics. The flagship of the Draconian Third Fleet, the most advanced warship in their arsenal. Every critical system had human modification codes embedded in the design. Without those modifications, Krathus continued, his voice hollow, our superior warships are expensive scrap metal. The chamber fell silent. Then Dr. Solara from the Scientific Union stood. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I've completed analysis of the abandoned human facilities. 52 research stations, 200 industrial complexes, over 2,000 individual installations. She pulled up images, empty laboratories, stripped factories, facilities that look perfectly functional from the outside. Every computer has been wiped with military-grade algorithms, 7-pass overwrites that make data recovery impossible. Every research file has been deleted. Every prototype has been removed. Even the recycling bins have been incinerated. Solara's hands shook as she advanced through the images. It's like they never existed. 30 years of human presence in our civilization, and they've erased every trace of their contributions, every improvement, every innovation, every breakthrough. She looked up at the council members, and that's when I realized the truth. They didn't just erase their work. They erased the fact that we've been dependent on them for decades. Zathara's body cracked, an actual physical fracture running through her crystalline form. The manifestation of stress her species experienced when confronted with existential threats. How did we not see this, she asked. Because we didn't want to, Velcor said quietly. We thought we were helping them develop, selling them technology, teaching them how galactic civilization worked. He pulled up economic data from the past 30 years. But look at the pattern. Every major efficiency improvement in the last 3 decades has human fingerprints on it. Trade route optimization, manufacturing protocols, energy production upgrades, banking algorithms. The data was overwhelming, undeniable. We thought they were just making minor improvements to our designs. We were wrong. They were rebuilding everything from the ground up, making it actually work. An intelligence officer named Zarketh stepped forward. He'd been investigating the human departure for the past week, following every lead, analyzing every piece of evidence. I've reconstructed the timeline, he said. 30 years ago, humans discovered the Kepler system. We sold them FTL drives at premium prices, told them that technology was beyond their ability to improve. He pulled up engineering records. Within 3 years, human engineers had increased FTL efficiency by 34%. We dismissed it as minor optimization. By year 10, they'd filed patents for revolutionary improvements. We ignored them. By year 15, they were running 60% of our critical infrastructure. We didn't notice because we didn't want to admit they'd become essential. Zarketh's next image showed the current state of galactic civilization. By year 30, we were completely dependent on human knowledge. And then we voted to steal their work, and they left. He looked around the chamber. They didn't just leave. They executed the most sophisticated withdrawal operation in galactic history. 4.2 million people vanished in 72 hours. They took every piece of technology they developed, destroyed what they couldn't take, and left us with empty shells that look functional but don't actually work without them. The chamber erupted, species blaming each other, accusations flying, old tensions surfacing. The Draconians accused the Altarians of helping humans escape. The Crystallines demanded the Century Republic pay for emergency energy. The Vroni Collective blamed everyone for being greedy enough to provoke the human departure. Zathara tried to call for order, but her voice was drowned out by the chaos. This was what humanity had held together. This fragile alliance of species who only cooperated because they all agreed humans were inferior. Without that common belief, they were tearing each other apart. The search operations began in the second week. Commander Zarkath led the first team, 20 Draconian warships equipped with the most advanced sensors in the galaxy. Their mission was simple: find where the humans went. It should have been easy. 4 million people needed supplies, food, water, raw materials. They couldn't just vanish. But after searching 50 different systems, Zarkath's team found nothing. No fuel purchases, no supply depot activity, no communication intercepts, no sensor traces. Every human fuel station had been emptied and abandoned. Every supply depot stripped bare. Every possible trail led to dead ends at the galactic edge. Trade Minister Velcor tried a different approach. Economic analysis. Humans needed resources. They'd have to establish trade with someone, set up mining operations, build infrastructure. His team identified 73 systems that had the resources humans would need. Planets with water, asteroid belts with minerals, gas giants for fuel harvesting. They investigated every single one, found nothing, no human activity, no signs of recent development, no evidence that anyone had been there in decades. The third search team focused on communication intercepts. 4 million people had to talk to each other. Coordinate, send messages. The team monitored every frequency, scanned every transmission across thousands of light years. Complete silence. Not a single human voice. Not one encrypted message. Not even background radiation that might indicate human presence. It was like 4.2 million people had simply stopped existing. 3,000 light years away in a hidden base at the edge of explored space, Victoria Carver watched the alien search operations and smiled. Her intelligence team had spent 30 years preparing for this moment, creating false trails, establishing decoy routes, building a network of misdirection so sophisticated that the aliens could search for centuries and never find the truth. Ma'am, the Draconian search team is investigating the Omega sector, her communications officer reported. That's the 7th decoy we've led them to, Vex said. How long before they figure out the pattern? At their current rate, another 6 months. Vex pulled up the master tracking display. It showed every alien search operation, every investigative team, every intelligence probe. All of them were looking in the wrong direction. Because humanity hadn't just left the galaxy, they'd left in a way that made it impossible to follow. The quantum fold drives didn't leave conventional FTL signatures. They didn't create the spatial distortions that allowed tracking. They simply moved ships from point A to point B without leaving any evidence they'd traveled the space between. And the destination coordinates were encrypted with quantum keys that had been destroyed immediately after use. The aliens could offer all the money in existence. It wouldn't help them. Humanity was gone, and they'd made sure no one could find them. Back in Council space, the fragmentation accelerated. Without humans to serve as a unifying factor, old hatreds resurfaced with shocking speed. The Draconian Empire and the Altarian Federation had been enemies for millennia. They'd only cooperated because the Council had forced them to. Now, with the Council's authority weakening, border skirmishes began. The Crystalline Empire demanded emergency energy supplies from the Century Republic. When the Century refused, the Crystallines threatened military action. The Vroni Collective, who had started this entire crisis by demanding the Kepler system, found themselves blamed by every other species. Trade embargoes were declared. Diplomatic relations severed. 3 weeks after humanity left, the first shots were fired. A Draconian patrol ship destroyed an Altarian freighter over a disputed border. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Only 7 species showed up. The alliance was dying. 6 months after the exodus, President Diana Shepard stood in her office on New Earth and authorized the broadcast that would change everything. Commander Kirov is ready, her chief of staff said. Then it's time, Diana replied. She'd waited 6 months deliberately. Let the aliens search. Let them panic. Let them understand the full scope of what they'd lost. Now they would hear the truth. Commander Thomas Kirov sat in the communications center and looked at the camera that would broadcast his message across every frequency the galaxy used. He'd been chosen for this task because he was good at explaining things simply, clearly, without diplomatic doublespeak. The message he was about to deliver would be direct, honest, final. "We're live in 30 seconds, the technician said. Kirov took a breath, thought about everything humanity had endured. 30 years of condescension, 3 decades of being treated like children. And now the moment to make their position absolutely clear. The light went green. "This is Commander Thomas Kirov speaking for all of humanity." His voice was calm, measured, the tone of someone delivering facts, not emotions. "For 6 months, the Galactic Council has been asking us to return. You've offered voting rights, territory, recognition, apologies. You've promised to treat us better in the future." He paused, let the words settle. "But you still don't understand why we left." Across the galaxy, in every council chamber and military headquarters and government office, aliens stopped what they were doing to listen. "You think this was about politics, about money, about respect?" Another pause. "You're wrong." Kirov leaned forward slightly. "We left because we finally realized we don't need you." In the council chambers, Sithara's crystalline form cracked further. "For 30 years we tried to be good partners. We shared our discoveries with you. We improved your technology. We solved your problems. We made your lives easier and more comfortable." Kirov's voice hardened. "And in return, you treated us like children who didn't know anything." He pulled up data displays behind him. "You called us primitive, but we made your primitive technology actually work. We increased your FTL efficiency by an average of 40%. We solved scientific problems that had puzzled your researchers for centuries. We prevented wars, negotiated peace agreements, and kept your economy running smoothly." The numbers were staggering, undeniable. "You called us inexperienced, but we solved problems you couldn't figure out. Your newest battleships running on human-modified systems. Your power grids operating on human efficiency upgrades. Your trade networks managed by human-written software." Kirov's expression shifted. Not angry, just matter of fact. "You called us worthless, but everything you valued was built on our work." In his office on New Earth, Marcus Webb watched the broadcast with quiet satisfaction. This was the moment, the truth delivered without apology. "Today, humanity lives in freedom," Kirov continued. "We have built 12 worlds that are more beautiful than anything in your galaxy. We've developed technology that makes your best science look like children's toys. We've created a civilization based on cooperation and respect, not exploitation and fear." He paused. Let the magnitude of his next words sink in. "And when I say your galaxy, I mean exactly that. New Earth doesn't exist in a neighboring sector. It doesn't exist in uncharted space at the galactic rim. New Earth exists in a different galaxy entirely. A place your ships will never reach. A place your sensors will never detect." The camera zoomed in slightly. "We didn't just leave your civilization. We left your galaxy." Another pause. Across the council chambers, the silence was absolute. "We are not angry with you." Anger would suggest we still care what you think." Kirov let those words hang in the air. "We don't." Across the galaxy, the message was being received, translated, understood. "You have made your choices. We have made ours. The age of human dependence on alien approval is over." Kirov stood. The camera followed him. "Our door remains open, but only to species who approach us with genuine respect and fair dealing. We will not negotiate with councils or collectives or empires. We will only deal with equals." His voice took on finality. "The Galactic Council is a relic of the past. It represents everything that is wrong with your civilization. Exploitation, inequality, and the belief that some species are more important than others. Humanity wants no part of that system. Not now, not ever." Kirov looked directly into the camera. "You taught us that we were expendable. Thank you for that lesson." He delivered the final words with absolute conviction. "Now you will learn what expendable really means. Welcome to your new reality. Welcome to a galaxy without humanity." The transmission ended. In the council chambers, alarms began to sound. Not emergency klaxons, something worse. The realization that humanity wasn't coming back. Ever. 1 year after the Exodus, Marcus Webb stood in front of a classroom full of students on New Earth and taught them about the year that changed everything. "Will we ever go back?" a young girl asked. Marcus smiled. At 48, he'd retired from politics and found something better, teaching the next generation, making sure they understood what their parents had accomplished. "We never left home," he said. "We just stopped letting them hold us back." One student raised his hand. "Professor Webb, do you think they understand now what they lost?" Marcus thought about Zathera's cracked crystalline form, about Krathus's humiliation, about Velkor's desperate economic reports, about the council chambers where 7 species now argued instead of 12. "I think," he said carefully, "that understanding comes too late for some lessons. They understand now, but understanding doesn't undo what happened. It doesn't bring us back. It just makes them realize what they had while they still had it." He looked out the window at the thriving city beyond. And that, he said, might be the most important lesson of all. The students nodded. They'd grown up hearing stories about the old galaxy, about the council that treated humans poorly, about the exodus that freed them. But for them, this was home. These 12 worlds, this new civilization. They'd never known anything else. Marcus dismissed the class and walked to his office window. Outside, he could see the sprawling city of New Earth's capital. Construction everywhere, new buildings rising, new parks being planted, new infrastructure being built. In 1 year, humanity had accomplished more than they had in 30 years under council oversight, because they were free to innovate, free to build, free to create without asking permission. A message arrived on his tablet from President Diana Shepard. "Meeting with alien ambassadors in 1 hour. Thought you might want to observe." Marcus smiled and headed for the presidential palace. President Diana Shepard sat in the diplomatic reception room and watched 3 alien ambassadors enter. Not council representatives, individual governments, species who had approached humanity respectfully, asking for trade agreements, requesting scientific cooperation, offering genuine partnership. The first was from the Solarian Science Collective, a species that had apologized for dismissing human research and asked to collaborate as peers. The second was from a small independent federation that had never been part of the council's inner circle. They'd watched humanity leave and decided the council's approach was wrong. The third was from an Altarian merchant guild, not the official Altarian government, a private organization that wanted to trade as equals. "Thank you for seeing us," the Solarian ambassador said. Diana nodded. "You approached us correctly, with respect, as equals. That matters." She pulled up the preliminary trade agreements her staff had prepared. "These terms are non-negotiable. No council involvement, no collective bargaining, individual governments dealing with individual governments. Take it or leave it." The ambassadors reviewed the documents. They were fair, balanced, nothing like the exploitative contracts the council had forced on humans for decades. "We accept," the Solarian said. "What does do with our?" The Federation representative added. The Altarian merchant smiled. "This is what trade should be, equal partners, fair terms, mutual benefit." Diana signed the agreements, the first diplomatic relationships of the New Earth era, not with empires or councils or collectives, with equals. Marcus stood in the observation gallery and watched the signing ceremony. He thought about the vote that had started everything, the moment when he'd stood alone in the council chamber and voted no. 1 voice against 12. It should have been meaningless. Instead, it had been the beginning of everything. His communicator chimed. A message from Sarah Blackwood. "Never thought I'd see this day. We did it." Marcus replied, "We did. And it was worth it." He looked out the window at New Earth, at the 12 planets visible in the sky, at the construction sites and research facilities and shipyards, at the civilization humanity had built in just 1 year, 4.5 million people now, growing every month as children were born into freedom. The Galactic Council had taught humanity a lesson, that sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing a game rigged against you. That true strength comes from independence, not from seeking approval from those who will never give it. That a species doesn't need anyone's permission to be successful. The universe was vast. The galaxy was huge, and humanity had found their corner of it, a place where they could live in peace, in dignity, in freedom. The Council could keep their broken civilization. Humanity had moved on to something better, and they would never look back. Far away in the council chambers of a fragmenting alliance, Prime Counselor Zathara stared at empty screens and understood what she'd lost. Not just workers, not just innovators, not just convenient problem solvers. The species that had been quietly holding galactic civilization together for 30 years, and now they were gone. Forever. The age of human dependence had ended. The age of human independence had begun. And the galaxy would never be the same.